Theater Futures is an editorial project supported by the Ford Foundation, for which American Theater commissioned 16 writers and thinkers from all over the U.S. to envision their ideal theater at a time when the art form and the industry are at a crossroads. To cap off this series, we've gathered 4 smart theater folks based in New York City for an in-person conversation about this in-person art form and its futures. Welcome to this conversation, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Weinert-Kendt. I'm the editor-in-chief of American Theater Magazine. Theater Futures is a series in which American Theater has published 16 essays over the past year about the state of the art form and business that we all love and care for. At a time when it's under particular stress, even existential pressure, you might say. The essays have been wide-ranging and various. I urge folks to check them out online if you haven't already. I know today's conversation will be uniquely illuminating as well. I just want to say before we start that the strongest message we hope to convey with this project is right in the title, Theater Futures. Both the idea that the theater has a future tense, but also that it's multiple. There are multiple futures. There's no single path forward. So I'm here joined by some wonderful people who will help us map out some of those futures, hopefully. Patricia McGregor, Artistic Director of New York Theater Workshop. Jae Hoon, a playwright and organizer. Lizzie Stern, Literary Director at Playwrights Horizons. And Deeksha Gaur, Executive Director of Theater Development Fund. So before we talk about the future, I want to talk about the present really quickly. I want to go around and ask each of you, how would you describe the moment we're in now as an art form and industry, and even if you want to go there as a culture? Patricia?
I'm going to start with the moment we're in right now.
Yes.
Which is the hope on the horizon for me is that there is such collaborative love between individual artists, institutions, organizations that are trying to hold each other to get to the future that we want. We know we're not there yet, but I think there has been such an increase in cross-institutional care, in trying to envision new ways and to not try to do it alone. I feel like in the past, there was a real sense of like, our institution, we're just going to do it alone, we're going to survive. And I think what's hopeful to me is that we are all reaching out to each other to figure out how we're going to get to the new horizon. So I think it is in some ways, as we know, a very challenging moment.
Yeah.
But in other ways, I think we're ultimately a collective, collaborative field and art form. And I think we're leaning into that more than we have in a long period of time. And I think that's where that's where I find the hope.
Great. Jesse, how would you answer that? Where are we?
I think we're in similar to what Patricia's saying. I think we're in challenging, but there's challenging times and there's a glimmer of hope here. For artists and art workers, I think we're in a position where we're really feeling the weight of the austerity policies that we are currently under because of current and previous administrations in the White House,
right?
And because of many administrations in our state and city governments. Artists are, at the end of the day, workers. We are affected by the economic conditions that surround us. And I think right now a lot of artists are feeling the heat of living paycheck to paycheck in a city that's becoming rapidly less affordable for working people. I think what's really incredible right now is that I see a lot of art workers coming into existing economic and social movements towards a city and a country that can function for working class people. And we are looking out at the world around us, and we are not becoming insular. I think we are really plugging into existing movements for social and economic justice. And I think, when we think about the current economic conditions that we're in, life as a working artist, and what that means materially, I think people are starting to really, really understand how the world around us really affects our ability to exist as artists. And, there's, I think, an instinct sometimes to kind of point at solely at institutions or solely at one specific person or individual. And really it is like, I think people are coming to understand that it is the economic system that we're living in, right, that needs to change fundamentally. It is not any one place or person that has to shift in order to create the economic change that artists need to survive. It really is we have to build a better economic system around us. And I think a lot of artists are coming to that realization. And as I won't say anything specific because that's against the rules. But there was a big political moment that happened yesterday that a lot of artists were involved in the making of. I'm speaking about the mayoral election.
We can mention it.
Okay,
we're
great.
good. We're in New York City. It's a Democratic primary was yesterday. We're taping this the day after that.
Yeah, this is the day after the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
A lot of artists got involved in the campaigns that were fighting for a more affordable New York.
Yeah.
This is really, I think, the crux of what I think will get artists and arts workers and arts institutions out of the austerity times that we are in, is plugging into existing movements that will transform the city around us.
That's great. Great. Lizzie, how would you answer that? How are we doing now?
Yeah. I mean, New York is very expensive.
Yeah.
This country is very expensive. I grew up in New York City. I have seen the city transform. This is a really tough time for people to live here, just period. Artists, of course, and administrators, anyone working in the arts. I think it's a really hard time. And in the midst of scarcity, theater has always innovated. That's what we do. We are the cockroach of art forms. We will survive. We will outlast. We're not going anywhere. And when I feel sort of mired in the austerity, to use Jesse's word, I look to the plays that I'm reading, and I look to the artists who are finding ways to rehearse and develop their work anyway. And this is so cliched, but it is like that line in White Lotus that Amy Lee Wood says, where she says, don't focus on the love you lost, focus on the love that you have. And that's where I'm trying to turn my attention to the artists who I love, who are making work that I love.
That's great. Deeksha?
Sure. Well, I come from the perspective of the audience, and because TDF's whole mission is to remove barriers to access. And so I'm very privileged in my role to see the impact in real time that the arts have on people. We have a Slack channel called Feel Good Feels, where literally every day I'm weeping at my desk because people tell me the impact that the arts are having on their lives. And so, it is a tough time, and I know that we are sort of reframing our relationship with the audience, but all the things that you talked about, the audience is feeling too. And so I'm really resonating with this idea of systems, and we're all moving into systems thinking rather than individual thinking. I'm really grateful for partners like Patricia and people in the field who are just choosing this as a moment to rewrite the rules, because the rules need rewriting. And I think that when you are in these moments of sort of crisis, they're actually the sort of fount of change. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the intentionality of joy and catharsis, and how much society needs that right now, right? So I have this silly Oura ring that measures my heart rate and my stress levels. And every time I go to the theater, it congratulates me for building restorative practices into my life.
Wow.
Or I go see a show and I'm sobbing about the show, and then I'm sobbing about my life, and then I come out and I'm ready to fight again. And so I think that we have an opportunity to remind audiences that joy is not a somewhat accidental byproduct. It's intentional, and it's necessary for whatever we have to go through it as a people, as a society next.
Right.
And that's the opportunity I see for our field right now.
That's amazing. I did want to hone in on, I love the very positive answers we got. I don't want to go negative necessarily, but I did want to just hone in on, and anyone can jump in on this, but we could go in the same order. What is the single most challenging thing about making work, promoting work, working to work right now? What is the thing that maybe keeps you up right now? Is it budgets? Is it?
I think budgets is such a given that I'm just going to say the economic challenges are real. What's interesting to me is the thing that really keeps me up is, do people in this ecosystem truly want it to be an inclusive art? Or are there some folks who are actually holding on to this idea, especially in New York theater, that it is actually an exclusive. It is a limited quantity. And so I think while there are real resources that we're fighting to get artists what they need, to get audiences accessibility, to get all of those, I've actually started to worry that underneath some of the conflict is there are some people who want the club to be small,
Okay.
and there are some of us who are fighting radically and rapidly to open it up,
Okay.
to be a real civic resource. And I think if we are legitimately trying to be a real civic resource, then we can actually connect with movements and connect with other organizations who are doing the work. So I think there's like, how do we keep the lights on? Yes, I think
Yes.
about that a lot.
Right. Right.
But underneath, how do we keep the lights on? How do I make sure that we're aligned with people that want to make sure this art form is for everyone? I always say I love Chef Jose Andre because he says, you make really great food not to serve a small amount of people. You make really great food to serve great food to a large amount of people.
Right.
And I think I think it's being revealed right now for whom it is really important, because it's easy to cut things now that you're worried about keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, are people committed to that this art form should be accessible for all? And I think that's an interesting, like, foundational question that's underneath the other more obvious and harrowing questions.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's great. Is there other challenges you can think of? I mean, you certainly named a few, Jesse, in your initial answer, but
Yeah, I mean, it's economic challenges for workers is certainly like, I think probably the biggest barrier to entry for any person, administrative or otherwise, any worker who wants to enter theater. I think it is a huge barrier to entry. And it's honestly a barrier to staying. I think I don't know anybody in the arts right now who's a working artist who is not considering stopping being a working artist. That's because it's, the thing about being able to afford a life in New York City or, in any major American city at this point, because of the kind of stranglehold that austerity policies have, and this era of politics. I think it's, not having a consistent income, a consistent source of healthcare, or a consistent source of, if you have a parent, childcare,
Yeah.
is, I think, a pretty significant barrier to entry for, continuing a career in the arts, for building a career in the arts.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like there is a future to be built, just on like an individual and on a collective scale of as workers, And it feels, it is kind of the ultimate version of, the alienation of the worker from
Yeah.
their labor. And I think certainly one of my top concerns as an artist is paying the bills and keeping the lights on. I think like there's never going to be another top concern because there's just simply nothing else that really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to be working in a lot of different opportunities for emerging playwrights. I've been lucky enough. We work together. It's been lovely to work with all these different theaters. And at the end of the day, there's always a thing in the back of my head where it's like, but this can't last. But yes, this is all temporary, because there is always a ticking clock when it comes to housing costs, when it comes to healthcare costs, when it comes to just the idea of building a life towards retirement.
Yes.
So we're in a place now, I think, where artists, I think, feel very alienated just from the art form,
Right.
where, because there's just, by no fault of like any individual company or individual person, it's less work can get produced, meaning that there is fewer jobs.
Mhm.
It means that fewer of us can work, meaning that fewer of us will be here in
Right.
5 years.
Right.
So when I think about the biggest challenge to building a future in theater where artists can really thrive,
Yeah.
and we can make the things that they're really excited about rather than the things they think will get them work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think just the cost of living and the lack of a steady income is
Right.
100% the top barrier.
Right. So it's not just a barrier to entry, it's a barrier to staying in, as you say. It's a barrier for people to continue in the middle.
And some people have that barrier and some people don't.
Yeah.
And so then we're going to have a real revelation of who has the ability to to sustain
Stay in, yeah.
when there are less jobs, which is part of the idea of like, do we want this to be both for practitioners and for audiences more accessible to more people? We had a fellow who has been through a lot of programs, jumped through all the hoops, who said just last week, I'm hungry, but I'm hungry. And it was real. I am hungry to do the art. I'm hungry to collaborate. But I'm literally hungry. And there are some people who are not going to be literally hungry.
Right.
So what are we going to do about the inequities that occur if we cannot feed people, make sure the lights are on, hit a fundamental baseline, health insurance? I keep thinking like, how do we get health insurance in our fellowships? How do we get, there's a hostel, there's a youth hostel on the Upper West Side. And I'm like, can we have an art hostel? How do we take care of some people's basic needs?
Yeah.
So that then they have the ability to continue to participate in the art.
Yeah. And then the other question becomes, what does that do to the culture too? When we eventually end up with a theater where it is art made by the rich for the rich.
Yeah.
What does that do to the art form? What does that do to the longevity of theater in general? What does that do for the longevity of American culture, period?
Right.
Where culture becomes gatekept from working people, from everyday people.
Yeah.
That's a really scary thing.
And whose stories are being reflected back to them? How can you build a culture of arts attendance if those stories don't reflect everyday people?
And how do we build the empathy machine?
That's right.
We have a lot of machines that we make in the art form, but one of the biggest is like the empathy machine that we need more than ever. And if there are fewer and fewer human stories that are able to sustain, to tell their story, we will lose the impact of the empathy machine that we are.
100%.
You keep going.
Yeah.
You know, it's something a lot of people ask, I'm sure all of us, about the impact of sort of AI in our work. And, you know, as we talk about opportunities, challenges, et cetera, it strikes me that, you know, 20 some period far from now, not that far from now, the only place where we will be guaranteed a human experience is sitting next to each other in a theater or a performance. And that is going to be a deeply compelling thing for many, many people. And so a lot of what I'm thinking about is, how do we not squander this opportunity?
Right.
We have some time to really think about our systems and our industry, to really build back relevancy with the audience. Because if they feel the relevancy and the resonance, you don't have to do as much marketing or whatever those pieces are.
Right.
And so this feels urgent to get all of us aligned, because there is this moment where people are going to need us in really tangible ways that they don't fully understand right now, or we don't fully understand.
People definitely felt that after or during COVID and after the lockdown and reopening, that we need in-person experiences, and that was very valuable. It does tend to be event to event sometimes, as opposed to a commitment, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I felt like when we came back from COVID, we came back to live theater or the performance, but with a sense of individuality still. So there's a lot of conversation about the entitlement of audiences and etiquette and things like that. And I think we came back sort of perhaps with an individual desire to engage with the art. But what I'm talking about is a desire to commune.
Okay.
That transcends the art, right? To sit and have a shared experience.
Right.
So we know that when people have a shared experience at a theater, their heart rates sync up.
Yeah, that's.
It's both engaging with the art, but engaging with each other in sort of kindness and empathy.
Well, and I do think, to your point of it being transactional, one of the things we can work on, like right now, I used to bartend in the East Village, so I love my area, right? I walk by and say, oh, I remember that place. I remember that place. Part of my goal, we've done a study, and in our theater, we have a small percentage of people in our zip code who attend our theater. To me, that's a big missed opportunity. That means we're not really engaging in our hyperlocal community. So one of the things we've really been trying to activate is what I call a culture campus, where the art is just a springboard for people to come and gather and to operate more like a library. Like, I love the work that Roberta does at, New York Public Library.
Right.
Libraries are destinations not just for a book, but a place to be and a place to hang out. And like, I think more and more theaters that have restaurants and have public spaces that are open. I remember for a long time, the signature lobby was like my office,
Yeah.
That's
my
right.
hangout spot, my,
Yep.
the collisions, orchestrated collisions, Jim
Yeah.
called it. So I think if part of what we're trying to fight is how to not just be as transactional, how do we make our space a destination
That's right.
that's not just when you buy a ticket, but a legitimate doors are open destination?
Right.
And then how do we also help link that destination into the hyperlocal? Because one of the other studies is that people don't want to travel. I don't want to travel as much as I did 5 years ago. So if we're only inviting people who are far away, then we're missing an opportunity to make it easy to just stop by and, engage. So I think one of the goals is to actually make us like a culture campus, a hub, a place of belonging, and that the shows like the Pied Piper or our programs might be the thing that first brings you in there. But it's actually the point is to be of service to people outside of just the ticket transaction.
Amazing.
And I think too, just to that, I want to add to this, and then I also want to bring in a slightly another element.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I love what everyone's saying, and I think I also would, for at least for the way that nonprofit theaters program, we program typically in seasons.
Yeah.
And we don't really use subscribers anymore. That system is really pre-pandemic, the subscription model, and so people aren't signing up for an entire season anymore. It's more of, is there something in this lineup? Like if it were a library, is there a book on this shelf
Yeah.
that would speak to you, that would bring you in?
Yeah.
And then is there a space that is comfortable where we want to spend time and connect with each other? Because part of why working in theater is unique is that it's such a collaborative form, and we are social people, and theater people are a very specific breed of people.
Yes.
I love theater people. There's no one I love than I listen. And sometimes the best collaborations and the best work come out of those sort of, oh, you're working on that. Oh, hi, let's just sit and have a glass of wine in this theater bar that now exists, which is amazing. I do want to just isolate another challenge that I'm noticing that I feel very concerned about, which is we've been talking about the art form itself and sort of how it's being impacted by all of these systemic challenges that we're just discussing. And something I notice is there's such a contraction of production opportunities. There's, of course, a contraction of development opportunities. We've all bemoaned that and continue to bemoan that. I think what's particularly challenging about the contraction of production opportunities is that for a playwright who's working on her play, it's never going to realize its final form unless it is produced. And if you're a novelist and you write a novel and you work for 15 years on your novel and it never gets published, well, at least it exists in its intended form.
Right.
And you can sit back and you can say, I finished it. Maybe 15 people will read it, but this is how it's meant to exist as an artistic product that I made. And for a writer, she doesn't have that really until she's in a theater learning about her play with that additional element of the audience and the way that informs the play. And I worry about the art form itself suffering as a result of this, that the art form itself is being stymied and thwarted because writers are not getting the chance to fully see their work on the page through by doing it in a room with people.
Well, and I think that reality of the contraction then compounds who gets the ability to do a full production.
Yeah.
Yep. Because we all know once somebody's done at least one production, then you're kind of in the pool and get to kind of work more, even if the work is less. And so one of my worries as we figure out how to pass the budgets and all of that is it already going to be what I call the heavyweights, the people who've already on Broadway, are already known, are already, how do we make sure to hold space for people to have that production and have the person that we give all those resources be a fairly unknown person or somebody who hasn't had that, when I think of the impact of like the Lazor brothers doing We Live in Cairo, who are now going on to do other things. But, people need to have enough faith to give new people their first, even in a time of economic challenge and, contraction of productions. And I'm particularly worried. I'm worried about everyone. I want Lynn Nottage and I want everyone to have all of their plays, but I also want to make sure that the Lynn Nottage of 20 years ago, or whoever the emerging, the Lucas Nath of all of that time ago, how do we make sure that they are protected, that they don't disappear in 5 years because they couldn't make it? And as much as I'm worried about everyone, I'm worried in particular about the people who aren't known as well, who aren't necessarily writing for TV as well. And that lack of production for those folks, which is where the big resources go, is really a concern.
I really hear that, and I think it speaks to a climate that has an ambivalent, perhaps, relationship to risk. And I think some places are seeing risk as their mission and their heart and soul and the way to get through in possibly challenging times, and other places that see it as the most dangerous thing you can do and not worth the risk.
Right.
And there are so many sort of different ways into that, and also different ways of defining what risk is.
Yes.
But I think that's a big part of it. People are nervous about risk.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, keep going.
no, please.
No, I was just going to say, I don't mean to say that producing a new artist, I certainly do not think that producing a new writer is a risk in and of itself. I don't believe that to be true. Go on.
No, I absolutely agree. And, prior to TDF, I spent 8 years in the tech world, and it was fascinating to go from for-profit back to nonprofit, because the first thing I sort of asked myself is, what do we chase with the same rigor that for-profit companies chase? The bottom line. And it really is impact. And so when I came to TDF and sort of entered this moment back again, I started to think about, this is not new, but how are we thinking about our resources, right? And we spent the last, 20, 30 years building fancy buildings and infrastructure and sort of diluting our money away from mission and programming. And, so when I look at what you guys did with Soho Rep and the ways that we're talking about audience development, all of a sudden we're thinking about our resources as a larger whole, and how can we tap into who does what best so that we can focus on our mission. An example of that might be, you guys can tell me better, but for an average production, your single ticket budget for marketing is what, 20 grand less, somewhere around there, which it is impossible to build a new audience to a show or any product or any brand in 6 weeks with 20 grand. It is not a real thing, right? And so, I've been thinking about TDF a lot in terms of, what if we were the audience development arm for New York City theater? What if our job was just that? And if we did it well enough, which is a big if, but if we did it well enough, these theaters can redirect their funds back into mission, back into artists, back into programming. And if we do a good job collectively of changing the culture, there will be an audience for every show. It is a risk mitigating factor. Though I agree with you, risk is a big word and needs to be quantified.
Right. Well, and I love to me is the sense of like a potluck. It's back to the original kind of question of what's giving me hope, or what.
Yeah.
In this moment, we're all trying to figure out what we can bring to the potluck.
That's right.
So that it's not that I'm cooking the whole dinner myself, which is a very kind of individual way of looking at it. But it's like, in the ecosystem, you are doing things with your journalism in the ecosystem. You can do things with marketing and ticketing. You can do things with the art that you make and the organizing. We can do things in the productions that we do, but you don't have to do it alone. That we're all trying to figure out, like, what is my strongest tool? What is the dish I make? I'm going to bring guacamole. What are you going to bring? And if we can all figure out what our guacamole is, maybe we'll be able to survive.
That's right. That's right.
I'll thank you both for saying how hard it is to be an unproduced playwright.
Yes.
So I don't have to say it.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree with what both of you have said about it, especially, the idea of, like, you spend years writing plays, you spend years developing plays, and if they don't get produced, you kind of feel like you have like a closet full of skeletons. So you're gonna flush on them. It's like, play is a living, breathing thing. It's, we write the skeleton, and everyone else puts the the body stuff. Yeah. So as a playwright, it does feel like I have just like a closet full of lovely skeletons, that hang
Beautiful skeletons.
gorgeous skeleton that never too much to the flesh shot. But it's but it is, I think the other part of it is that for about 2 years I was on the artist employment program through Creative New York with my theater company, and that covered my healthcare, that covered my salary, that covered my rent. There is, I think, that frustration and that struggle of just not being able to fully realize any of your work, or not being able to really honestly experience what it is to actually work as a playwright. And kind of just get the opportunity to like maybe guess at it.
Yeah.
I think that would not be as difficult for a lot of playwrights had they have work inside of it, which for me at the artist employment program was like developing plays, and was like getting to do all these wonderful fellowships and reading opportunities, and it feels more like you're building to something when you have like your needs met and you can actually focus on them.
Yeah.
I think for the real struggle for playwrights who are I'm back to not being on that because the grant is defunct.
Yeah.
But it is that situation where it's like you don't really have the opportunity to even be in that development space if you are living paycheck to paycheck and you can't actually focus on the artistry.
Yeah.
So it's I think another tough thing that I think we're gonna have to look at is how to keep artists fed in that space when there is no production opportunity, when there are fewer production opportunities, right? Because we are in a major contraction now, and I think a lot of myself and a lot of other playwrights, we are kind of going like, well, I don't think I can write at this thing. I don't know like when it's going to be the next time I can actually sit down and finish this play.
Yeah.
Because just simply the barrier of like, can I eat food? Pay my rent. Yeah.
I think yes to all of that. And I think too, there's an additional element. At Playwrights Horizons, I started a financial literacy program with this wonderful financial planner named Ari Teplitz. Shout out to Ari Teplitz.
He's on our board.
He's an amazing guy. And basically, we identified this real need in the artist community. We want everyone to have more resources, and are limited in the institutional ability to control or have it really much to do with that. But equipping people with information is really important. And there is a gatekeeping around even information about how to think about money and your own money. And a lot of playwrights who we work with, they go on to get, sometimes like a big TV contract, and it comes with a financial counselor who sits down with you and explains everything, walks you through it, and demystifies a lot, and helps undo a lot of shame that comes with the financial scarcity of this industry and of this profession. And that information, I think, should be democratized. I really think that in a materially scarce environment, information is not a scarce resource. It is an abundant resource, and helping support each other within this and giving people access to that information, facilitating that, is something we can do that I really do believe in and cling to as hope. To go back to your first.
I think it's also important to highlight again, like the movements that are around this.
Yes.
When I was at MAGI, I did a panel about the New York Health Act, which is, I don't know if it's back in the legislative session next year, but it's a single payer healthcare system for New York City. It is basically Medicare for all at the state level. But there are policies that are going through our state and city government right now that would actually be transformative for artists and would take the burden off of institutions.
Yes.
Providing healthcare, of providing housing. If we can build universal social health, we can actually build affordable housing in this city, and take some of these resources back from greedy landlords who have been trying to turn this into a billionaire's playground. Like, if we can implement universal childcare, which takes the burden off of so many parents who are trying to be playwrights. I have many friends who are parents who are trying to be playwrights. Just can't because of the financial strain that parenting puts on you. Same with school.
Yes.
If we have fully funded CUNY and SUNY schools, which there are people in our government and in our our organizing worlds within DSA and other circles who are trying to actually pass fully funded CUNY and SUNY schools with a quality education. And there are places like Hunter College. I went to Hunter College. I have an MFA from Hunter College. And these institutions, these systems actually make it possible for working people to get involved in our theater world and actually stay there. But if we can remove those barriers on a systemic, universal level, it not only impacts us and impacts bus drivers, impacts everybody.
Yeah.
But it's just a giant strain off of theater workers, theater administrators, theater institutions. I think it's really important that we highlight those struggles because, again, theater workers poured into the race for Zoran Mandani and delivered him that wit. That is really, really an important step into making the city more affordable. If we can keep that momentum going, if we can involve theater workers and theater institutions in the fight for these universal social programs, it takes the burden off of institutions, and it takes away some of the animosity between workers and institution, and it allows us to actually build a kind of a working relationship with each other.
Yeah. We have the versus Zoran name on the board here, so for call out. I want to ask you, Patricia, you run an institution and you're still a working artist. You have a play up there now, Nat King Cole, Lights Out. Or Lights Out, Nat King Cole. Sorry, had it backwards. I want to just ask you how you wear those two hats, and also what do you think artists and institutions owe to each other? How can they work better together?
I mean, I think that one, I think it's useful to be a working artist because I feel it in my bones how much the artist wants and needs what an organization, institution could give. So I agree completely that I deeply would love even this position and the meetings I'm in to help people get healthcare, housing, all of those things, right? So I'm trying to do some organizing on that side. I also am so sympathetic to trying to find every opportunity to say yes. I exhaust my staff often because I'm like, we have to find a yes. And even if it's not the full yes, we've got to be able to find some kind of yes because I feel so closely all of the no's that, how that can impact you. I also feel like artists, we never accept the world as it is. We are fundamentally making pieces that are either holding up a mirror or building a new world. So I would say two things: running the organization and being a working artist. I'm often trying to balance keeping enough of my muscles going on as an artist that helps keep my knives sharp, right? I think it's helpful for when I'm talking to other artists and giving notes and all those kinds of things. It's helpful when I'm fundraising. It's helpful when I'm knowing artists and recruiting artists. So that's very useful. I also sometimes am very strategic in that something like that Nat King Cole, I knew that there was a financial structure under there that was going to help us say yes to something like A Knock on the Roof. Because the finances of Lights Out were going to help us get to a financial place where we can pass a budget on Knock on the Roof. So there's some of that of what I can bring in as an artist. And it takes resources, but my projects usually are giving back resources in a certain kind of way. And I would say, most importantly, and I think the workshop has generally operated in this kind of way, where it really is a place that is artist forward, where we often, people come and they will sometimes say, oh my gosh, this is where they did Rent. It's like, no, these bricks, the people who came in this place, the artists who came in this place are what did Rent. So the whole organization is just here for the artists in every kind of way, in every way we can. And the math is bad. I might get 500 scripts in. We're doing 4 to 5 production. That means I'm doing 1% of the extraordinary work in full production. That is terrible, terrible math. But if we can find every possible way to open up our spaces, sometimes we have people who want to do a reading, and I say, do a reading in the kitchen. Do anything. I just want to pour everything out of the building and give it over to the artists, because I am, I'm a good fundraiser. I'm a good advocate. I'm a good champion. I think I can really animate people towards the art because I feel it so closely, the artists that I want to support. But ultimately, the bricks are really there for the artists and the audience. We have to figure out how the folks in the organization are there to support the artists and the audience. But I think it really wants to be artist-led. And the second that I sniff, even with myself, the idea that the institution knows best. I'm like, no, the institution is here to support the artists and the audiences who know best.
Yeah.
So that's my, there's a friction. There's a friction.
Stay
Sometimes,
awake.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Interesting.
But that level of clarity is so important. And I think that, I love words and I love language. So I spend a lot of time thinking about people's mission statements. And so many mission statements, which are supposed to be the driving impetus of your work, are so unclear. And having clarity around what you have to do, even though there is friction, more often than not, I think gets you closer to the right decision, right? And so I love hearing you speak about this stuff, because there is no inherent easy truth. Everything we do, because we are in collaboration, is in friction. And knowing what we will go to bat for and what we won't, even though both are super worthy, is something that I think we as an industry could all do better.
I did have another question for you, Deeksha.
Sure.
I tell you, when we asked theater folks if they could change one thing about the theater, almost all of them answer lowering barriers to access.
Yeah.
And that's not just ticket prices, although that's a lot of it. It's also a sense of welcome, a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about it? Is it more than price point on the tickets? And what
100%.
Okay, tell me about it.
100%.
Yeah.
Price is an indicator of value. Okay? Price is an indicator of interest. Now, their price is also a very specific thing based on where you're at financially and what you can afford, et cetera. But I think, when we talk about our work, we talk about the financial, physical, and invisible barriers. And the financial ones, everyone has controls over their own pricing mechanisms. It's a lever. The physical ones are a little more real, right? From everything from if your theater doesn't have accessible restrooms, if it doesn't have enough wheelchair seating. Frankly, some of the seats are too small for, a tall audience member. There's just so many ways that we make it harder. And then there's the invisible barriers, which is a perception that I will go to an experience that I will not enjoy, and this is my free time. This is my leisure time, right? And so I always like to use myself as an example. I was a Tony nominator this year, so I got really nice seats for the first time in my life. And I remember in the month of December, 2 back-to-back issues where I had a racialized experience in my seat. And, I don't mean to say this for woe is me.
Right.
But my point is, I want to be there. I'm excited to be there. I see myself as sort of a leader in this world. And it can ruin it for me, and I'm choosing to be there. If somebody has a perception of that and is not even sure if the experience is for them, they're never coming back.
Yeah.
And so the role that other audience members play, the role that ushers play, the role that there are all of these sort of really intangible micro moments that can ruin things.
Yeah.
Or blow them up in a really positive way, right? So I think about that a lot. And I think our biggest challenge as an industry, if we're future facing, is actually that last one.
Yeah.
Everyone else it's math. Pricing is math.
Yes.
It has.
Dominic Moore, one of our most read pieces years ago, Dominic Morrisseau wrote, I think it was The Christians, that she saw at Playwrights and had an experience that was racialized, where someone was telling her to quiet down because it's a church experience, and she was having a church experience, and that's
She was having her experience. You don't have to defend it in any way. I mean, and I say this, we've been playing around with this idea of this phrase that was just introduced to me. It was just this targeted universalism, right? So when you do what is best for the person who needs the most, you're actually doing what is best for everyone.
okay.
Right. So you take closed captions on your TV.
Yes.
Most people I know would not identify as deaf or hard of hearing, but who would use it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That was very clumsily said, but I think you get my point.
Yeah. No. Totally.
There's so there we do autism friendly performances. So
I often sit in a house where there's a certain layer of noise and chatter, where the lights are up, where it doesn't look like the hallowed, sacred experience that you're used to having. And it doesn't impact my enjoyment of the show.
Right.
So I think that we've set up some rules that probably need some questioning
Okay.
and some reevaluation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're filming this, as we mentioned, on the day after the Democratic mayoral primary in New York City. It's a very uncertain time, as it often is for the nation and the world. I wonder, is there something you could say about what theater can or should, if it has a role to speak to or address the state of the world, the state of our apart? Let's bracket the organizing outside, but like literally the programming and the act of theater and the gathering of theater. What does it have to say to our moment?
I mean, I think we are stuck in all of these kind of devices and ways to communicate,
Yes.
but not actually to hear each other, not actually to feel each other, not actually to build empathy, and not to have an elongated experience that then you can process with someone else. We tend to be very rapid fire in our reaction to things. So, for example, We Live in Cairo, which is the piece that we started our season with. You know, I felt it was really urgent that we had a piece that had to do with student protests, and this one was set in the Arab Spring, and it's set not in our current moment, but the conversations we were able to have about our current moment, about understanding motivations of different people who are trying to figure out how to move the world forward. I think we can get into people's head and heart spaces in a very deep way, in a way that we are very locked. And I think it can start to unlock. It's that empathy machine that we talked about. And we desperately, desperately need that to quiet ourselves enough to listen to someone else, to feel someone else's experience, to have a reflection of our own experience, but also with time to process. And I think it's vital. And I'm seeing it happen. I feel like it has to happen. It has to happen in its own unique way, because I think theater does something that is getting to this very human, kind of getting under all of our armor to this very human space. But I think it is our superpower. I think it is the thing that AI cannot do.
Right.
And I think it is sacred and urgent and can be joyful.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to add too, I think the emotional part of it is so important. And there's also the cerebral and intellectual part that goes with everything you're saying. And I'm really interested in plays that are living in gray areas around questions or topics that have been quite polarized and made into black and white in this country and in our discourse. And I'm interested in seeing plays that are curious about fuzzy morals and not trying to teach a lesson or moralize, but invite you to consider questions with courage, and maybe to think of questions you didn't know that you had, and explore those questions in a space with other people, and to look at something from someone else's perspective. I see us living in this digital isolation period that we've been talking about. It untethers us from having connections with each other, and it also untethers us from understanding in a complex way what is going on around us and what we're reading on the news. And I see theater as an interruption to that, and a space where people can engage with those questions with so much more complexity and nuance, specificity, and hopefully real conversation.
I like that. And my friend Helen Shaw calls it thinking the long thought, but you might add feeling the long feel, I guess.
It's both. I think it's really both.
Yeah, but Brandon Jacob Jenkins has said the theater can make you feel a thought, which is
I think that feels true.
yeah.
That's exactly.
And I think
You should think about playwriting.
Yeah.
You should think, yeah, those words. You might want to write that down.
who is that guy? I never.
Did you have something, Jake, or no? Sorry.
Well, just, I mean, it's an echolocation of what everyone else has said here, which is that, I've been reflecting very personally on this as an audience member. And, it has been an extremely challenging year for many of us. And I often find that the thing that gets me out of bed, or that the thing that gets me ready for the next day, for the fight, for whatever, is taking that time in the theater, and is understanding that I'm not alone, because I'm an ugly crier at the theater. And when I hear the people around me doing the sniffles and stuff, you just feel less alone.
Yeah.
And all of those things, thoughts, feelings, perspectives, whatever those things are, they are transformative.
Yeah.
On a small level, like on a day-to-day micro moment level, and a larger level. So that's just super important right now.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've always been like, I'm not really like opposed to theater that teaches, but I think there is a specific way we can teach. As a playwright, I'm always thinking about politics in my work.
Sure.
That's my work, very politics forward.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what I've been thinking about as a writer in the past few years is how to like portray big moments in political history, or big political moments that we're facing now.
Yeah.
I think, and as somebody who's been an organizer, who's worked in electoral politics, who's knocked a million doors in a million different states for a bunch of different candidates, I think you kind of develop a curiosity about why people think the way they think, and why they make decisions in the way they do.
Right.
But you also start to see how very innocuous or mundane policy decisions, and how systems that are set up have large scale effects on broad collectives, and also like have like really devastating emotional effects on specific people.
Right.
I've been working on a 2-part play about the Korean adoption industry, and I'm adopted. I understand those things, but it's it is really like in researching kind of the political and sort of business and cultural and religious origins of that industry,
Right.
how it very materially shaped into the human trafficking ring that it was,
Right.
and the effects that it's had emotionally on adoptees who are now adults.
Right.
But it's so much of that work is about like examining larger issues like imperialism, like U.S. Intervention in foreign countries, because it's got all these roots in very broad political moments. And I think from my perspective, my job as a playwright is to like show people those systems, their effects on people, if something else is possible.
Right.
I think it's absolutely about raising questions, but I think it's, for me, like as a playwright, I think having a really distinct POV is like the thing that really helps me connect with audiences.
Right.
Because I just want them to understand how I came to my political perspective about this.
Right.
And all these factors that led to the conditions that kind of created one of these situations we're in. And kind of similarly to we live in Cairo, it's, Korean adoption industry was founded in 1955. It's been, it has its roots in 1948 and beyond, but it's like it really coincides with U.S. interventions and U.S. wars and U.S. funded foreign policy that have, that I think resonate with a lot of audiences now. I'm not writing about Palestine, but it is about Palestine.
Yeah, sure.
But it's about Korea, and it's about adoptees, but it's about the effects of U.S. funded wars and U.S. funded foreign intervention. So I think what theater has a really sharp ability to do, and that it's the kind of theater that's really inspired me, is to teach people emotionally about these large political concepts. It's one thing to like just tell someone or to like
Graphics to a speech, right? Yeah,
but it's another thing to like make someone feel that,
right,
and still land at kind of perspective that I want. It's a little magic trick.
I think that, which is great, and I think that artists, one of the most amazing thing about artists is that they are almost childlike in their sense of wonder at the world and learning, perennial students. And when I walk into a theater, I want to learn something.
Yeah.
I like miss being in school, honestly. I mean, the homework, very stressful, but I really miss learning and crave that, honestly. And I think that writers are the best teachers.
Yeah.
Well, I think in the way that when you learn a new language, you can learn so much in the classroom, but if you go somewhere,
Yeah.
if you live among the people, that's how you learn the depth of language and that's how you integrate it yourself. So for me, part of what's exciting about a range of theater and theatrical experiences, to me, they're each like a passport. And sometimes that passport might take you to a kitchen in Carbondale, Illinois. And sometimes it might take you across the world. And sometimes it might be in the future. And sometimes it might be in the past. But you as an audience, like strap in
That's right.
and go to this whole other world. Very Eleanor Fuchs. Like you go to a whole other place and you learn what you can learn. And then you all come out together.
It's wild.
Holy smokes.
It's really wild.
You just got a whole master's degree program in this place because you got to immersively go there. And not only do I think that individual experience can be revolutionary, but what would happen if groups of people all travel to 5 different countries or 10 different countries or 10 different places together? You would learn so much, and then you would learn so much about each other because you would talk about,
That's right.
remember when we went to Carbondale, Illinois? Remember how they made that lasagna?
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the great connective tissue that this kind of like passport transportation, that the immersive experience of theater can do. And it can do it in a variety of ways. I always like to celebrate the like yes and of what theater can do and what in each individual production can do. But then cumulatively, your heart, your mind, every part of you is so expanded because you've had an immersive experience into someone else's life, into that other country of their world.
100%. And the things that you connect with as an audience member is also deeply surprising, right? So I was really struck by the intentionality of this is the perspective I want you to have and the perspective I want you to learn, which is so valuable. And I agree with you completely on the strong point of view. And on top of that, there are these surprising learnings that relate to your own life and to your own sort of histories and connections. And, yeah, I'm thinking about Counting and Cracking down at the Skirball Center. And I knew very little about Sri Lankan history, which I was thrilled to learn. But also, you know, as being an immigrant and watching that, the parents' experience versus just the child's experience. I mean, there were so many insights and there were so many aha moments, and we have these collections of insights. And that's what I love about the dynamism of what you do as well, is that aha moment can come from anywhere. Any surprising, you know.
Well, and I love that some things that you learn are about history, about structures, and some of them are very internal.
Very.
On my desk, there's what we call the grief suite, right? Because I think we've all experienced grief. Post-pandemic, everyone's experienced grief. We all have to figure out how to articulate grief, how to move through it. And so, for example, Abigail Bankson has this piece, My Joy is Heavy. And I listened to some of the songs. The anthem song is My Joy is Heavy. And to your point of what helps you get out of bed, I've had unspeakable grief in my life. And I listen to her song where I hear Mona Pernod's monologue about grief. And all of a sudden, I'm able to feel not so isolated. You know, Vivek Murthy the Surgeon General talks a lot about social isolation. I feel not so isolated, even in a world that's in here, but I don't recognize. And so this work of art helps me understand this world right here and move through something like grief, move through existential crisis, move through those things. And so sometimes it's about going somewhere very far away, but sometimes it's about going very deep.
Yeah.
It's like the ocean, into that mine of that murkiness that we don't allow ourselves to go there.
That's right.
An artist unearthed that for us.
And I love that. And I need to say, I think how it costs artists, it really does cost artists something to offer that.
Yeah.
There is something so profoundly vulnerable about writing a play and sharing it with someone, let alone sharing it with a room full of strangers and putting yourself on the line like that. It is a tremendous act of courage that cannot go unnoticed. If it's going to be impactful and stir that up, it costs them something to do that. And so I sometimes find myself troubled by or questioning our culture of criticism that surrounds plays, which I know is a sort of new topic to throw into the mix here. But I do really sometimes feel and notice in the way that the ways that plays are talked about, there is not an acknowledgement of what it really takes to put this out there.
Right.
And I worry that there is a lack of assumption of best intention in criticism. I could talk about this much longer. I think I don't want to rant about it, and I don't want to create too much agita, because I think we all feel ways that the culture of the discourse around plays could be more respectful of the process and what artists are offering, because it is so monumental and so important.
Agreed.
And so hard to do.
It's almost like I wish it was treated like Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't stick the landing, you understand the journey, the physical cost, the training, everything that was given to even get to the platform.
Exactly.
So if someone falls, we don't have to pretend that they didn't fall, but we can also acknowledge the monumental, virtuosic gift of themselves that they have poured into a thing, even if they fell off the bar that one time.
Absolutely. And I think what's uniquely challenging for theater artists in the space is the playwright is sitting there watching her play happen on stage, and there's nothing she can do about it. She just has to sit there and let it be whatever is happening, and she has to do that over and over and over again. It's new every night, and she has to sit there with all these people doing it. And it just really asks something of you that it's just different. If you've made a movie and you're sitting there watching this movie that you've made, you've already, it's just it's a really different thing what's being asked of an artist, especially once reviews are out there.
Yeah. I used to research Brecht's learning plays, and he always talked about the learning plays as sort of a dialectical theater. And the whole purpose of it was to sort of level the playing field between artist and audience.
Okay.
And I, because from his perspective, he wanted to teach about socialism. Sure, there's this person who kind of wants to do the same thing, but it's but it is I think there is when one looks at art purely as a commodity, and when we look at art in this Amazon product where we review a rice cooker, I think that's really put a negative effect on the way we look at art in the making of it, in the producing of it, and in the criticism of it, and as in the receiving of it. And I think there is part of what I love about dialectical theater is that you sort of you bring a sort of energy into the room where it feels like there's a little bit more of an exchange, and it's hard to do because we live under capitalism. The way we can make art is through exchange, just through monetary exchange. So it feels like, when you go see a play and you pay for it, I don't brag it comes, but but it's when you pay for it, there is this kind of thing in the back of a lot of audience members' head. It's I am seeing a product, I'm not seeing
100%, right? 100%.
There is something to, I think, philosophically, emotionally, that I think needs to shift in the way that we make our relationship with audience. And I think that that's a huge thing that creates critics who kind of stop at this good, this bad.
Right.
Which it's quite a few of them. Sorry, it's quite a few of them.
Well, it's the entire setup is around commodification. I mean, the entire setup, and this is not just criticism. It's the way our institutions are set up, the way we transact on ticket price. Everything is about quick decisions, transactions, and so perhaps there's a sense that critics are giving audiences what they want. I'm not sure they are, but that's a different conversation. I think in general, something I've been thinking about is that on the sort of false spectrum that I just made up of like transactional to deeply messily human. Like the closer you get to this, right? The closer you move away from policy into true interaction and listening, to your earlier point, the closer you are to what we're trying to do. And the question of how you do that under capitalism, I think, is really
You make some radical investments. Like Anthony Ross Costanza, what he's doing in Opera Philadelphia, Pay What You Wish. Even the name of it, it's kind of magical. Legitimately, people could pay what they wish. I think the average ticket price was $16, but they raised $6 million because a few people really thought it would be wonderful if people could just choose. And then if you choose to go in and you decided to pay $5, you're going to go in and experience a different, and you get to opt into what that price is. So it's going to take some radical investments from some people, and there are people with resources to have it.
Pay what you wish instead of pay what you can. It's more like what you wish.
Pay what you wish to pay. And so I'm really interested knowing that money doesn't disappear, it just changes form.
Right. Okay.
So if there are people, and there are real resources who are dedicated to this art form being for more people.
Yeah.
So that you can pay what you wish while still paying actors, while still investing in production, while still doing those things. I'm kind of interested in this time, if we're going to see some people make some radical investments like they did to allow that pay what you wish to happen.
Yeah.
Because those people are in our ecosystem, and I think it's time to pony up.
I'm with you. I mean,
sorry, I just
perfect.
True. If purpose and impact is our currency,
That's
right? That we want to live our purpose, that we want to make impact, and some of that impact is supporting artists so we can even have the art. Some of that impact is having spaces where people can feel welcome, where the 3 accessibility points that you're talking about can be real. Some of that impact is so we can even have multi-generations of people feel like I can legitimately walk in that door and it's going to either be something for me, or if it's not, I'll still be welcomed and I didn't, pay $100 for something that I don't feel impacted by. But I think in order to do that, there can and should, and I point to Anthony because I think it's a really exciting example of like some people made some real investments, and those investments made it so that more people could enjoy while people are still getting paid. And it's completely inspirational. And I'm not afraid to say it's going to take some people who can, who talk about it, to like pony up.
to pony up. And to realize why they're doing it.
Yes.
Because, we talk a lot, very rightly, about the gatekeeping nature of philanthropy, right? And I think that in my new sort of ambit of doing fundraising, there are fundraisers who are absolutely transactional or funders who are transactional too. And then there are funders who are invested in our collective well-being. And I think, one of the things I struggle with in terms of having this ecosystem-wide view, but working with individual institutions, is how can we be part of a collective liberation, right? And who are the funders who are going to allow that to happen, not just for like their one theater or for their one cause, but really with this idea of like what lifts all boats. So, but I'm with you. It's time to go. Change your attitude. Give us the minute. Let's go.
Get involved. To me, it's like, this is I don't mind fundraising because I really think like this is an opportunity.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity to join a thing, to have impact, to live the purpose, to animate things. And like a little bit could go a long way for a lot of people. I think, it's bad math, but artists are good economists. We make a lot out of a little. And I feel like some of these radical investments could really help not only stabilize, but get to a vitality.
That's right.
In our ecosystem, which is what we need.
I also, I think it points to a broader, like more long view conversation about the function of art in society.
Right.
Yes.
We have these conversations periodically about the subway, about the MTA. Why is the MTA not making money? The MTA shouldn't have to make money. The library shouldn't have to make money. Art shouldn't have to make money.
Right.
These are like long conversations. These are public goods. These are public goods. And if they are public goods, they should be funded. And if they should be funded, they should be funded by taxing the rich.
Right.
Because we have this concentration of wealth at the very top of our system. And we are going to them. These our institutions have to go to them to beg them for money. They shouldn't have to beg for money. This is a public investment. It is a public good.
Right.
They should pay their taxes. Those taxes should be invested in the arts. They should be invested in keeping artists afloat. They should be invested in making sure that working people are fed. It's just plain and simple.
Right.
It is embarrassing that in the richest country in the history of the world that we have to beg for money for art, for healthcare, for the right to live.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's in the long term, I think we really need to be looking at like, why do we have to like ask you for this?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like, if you believe this is public good, if you really want to help people, pay your taxes and help us create a system and elect people to office who are going to make sure that you are going to pay your fair share of taxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Theater artists unite. This has been a great conversation. We need to wrap now, but after the final question I do want to ask you is, since we're talking about art, what's one piece of art or a piece of entertainment that you want to just tell us about that you love that needs to be more widely known? Patricia?
I will say a magical moment. I love the movie Sing Sing. It's not a theater piece, but
okay, no,
it's about theater.
Be whatever.
It's also about
it
the
is.
power of theater.
That's right.
And so I saw Sing Sing. I loved it. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is about the transformational power of theater. And we got an ask for the formerly incarcerated people, many of whom are in the movie, that they wanted to do the piece, Mummy's Code, in an actual theater.
Oh, right, right.
And so we got to do this performance where our space, and some of them knew rents, and some of the things that make our space meaningful, and they performed Mummy's Code on our stage. And so I will say, first of all, Sing Sing, if anyone hasn't seen it, they should just see it.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant film, but it also talks about the power of art.
Right.
The power of theater specifically, the transformational power. So I love that piece. And then I loved that we got to give something back to that incredible work of art by hosting those folks on our stage. I'll never forget it. And there's a lot of reasons why I do what I do, but to be able to say yes to them, coming to do it on our stage, I think is one of the reasons why I sit in this seat.
That's great. What do you want to shout out, Jesse?
I just read The Language of Blood, which is, it's still a book, but it's by Jane Young Trenka, who is a Korean adoptee. A lot of it's about, her and her sister growing up as Korean adoptees in America. And a lot of the sort of psychological damage that the foreign adoption system did to them, and about her eventually making her way back to Korea. It's really, really powerful. And I think she captures the psychological and emotional reality of adoption in a way that I don't think a lot of adoption literature has.
Okay.
It's very powerful and visceral, and kind of grabs your heart in a really immediate way.
Cool. Lizzie, I think you told me you had one.
I do have one.
Yeah.
It's a book.
Yeah.
It's called Theater of the Unimpressed. It is by Jordan Tannehill. Shout out, awesome playwright. We love Jordan Tannehill's writing in all forms. This book is my new theater Bible. It was written 10 years ago. It feels incredibly relevant to this conversation and to what's happening in New York today, even though Jordan was living in London when he wrote it, and he's from Canada. So it's a very triangulated international perspective, and it's refreshing in some ways to realize and understand that what we're talking about here is, yes, unique and particular, and also not unique and particular. I learned a lot from it, and I think it's a pretty quick and potentially therapeutic read for all theater practitioners.
Sounds good. Deeksha, you can close this out.
Well, I mentioned it earlier, so I'll talk about Counting and Cracking.
Oh, yeah.
Which I very facetiously, people know, try to avoid long shows.
Yes.
It was the day I went to see it, the morning of which we learned that we had a shelter in place in our school, which is something that I'm still getting used to as a concept. I'm sure many of us are as parents. And I did not want to be there, but it was so transformative for me in every way, both as a history lesson, as a formal piece of what they did with form and function in that play, with the language, with the sort of sense of belonging. the humor, the joy, right? And making space for joy and what that did to my brain. So yeah, core memory. It was amazing. I hope it comes back.
Yeah, I hope it tours the world too, because I really loved it as well. Patricia, Jesse, Lizzie, Deeksha, thank you so much for your time. We think we saw theater, so thanks everybody.